Hello, this is an anonymous. What follows are some recordings of L. Ron Hubbard taken from various tapes of his lectures. So, Mr. Hubbard, would you explain to us the scientological view of matter, energy, space and time, or MEST as you call it, and how that relates to religion?
Now, the MEST universe is all very well, but it's all illusion. One doesn't want an illusion, so he can't have an illusion. And when he was very young, why, Christ was all right. He was very friendly, as a matter of fact, and so on. But that's mostly people, you know, they have to believe in that sort of thing. And they did once, but it requires nothing but faith. And, of course, they can't have any faith anymore. And they did have hopes on that once in a while, but actually religion doesn't lead anybody anyplace in the final analysis, because you never get your wish anyway. So, of course, one can't survive on the basis of spirits and religion and so forth. So that leaves just, of course, God. And, of course, God naturally exists because there is all this space around here, and this space is obviously surviving. So, of course, it's obviously surviving. Of course, space itself is liable to collapse, but the prime mover unmoved is not liable to collapse because he created all this, and maybe he can't either, and nobody yet has come up with as flat a can't survive as God will never again be able to create another MEST universe. But if we mentioned it, brother, it'd be out in the streets.
So, Mr. Hubbard, you do believe there is a God. How do you feel about God and his relationship to mankind?
He's told what the eighth commandment is: God is everywhere, God is everything, God is in everything, God is out of everything and is in everything, and it watches you, and the watchbirds are watching you, and God is watching you, and everybody's keeping his finger on you. And first thing you know, the fellow's going to say to himself, there's something wrong with this. I wish I had a little privacy. and this is hard on him. So, if he's accepted this concept, or this description, which is perfectly true, I mean, God is everywhere, he isn't watching you. You are it. Anyhow, it's perfectly true, maybe, to him, that God is everywhere, and he'll do something which he knows would be very offensive to what his concept of God is. And he knew that God was watching him, so therefore this is an overt act against God. And you know, you can pick that up out of almost anybody that has ever been ever studied Christianity.
Interesting, Mr. Hubbard. It would seem you believe in something higher than God. What was it again?
The prime mover unmoved is not...
So, where do you suppose God came from? The prime mover unmoved, I suppose.
But it believes only one thing. I am fixed in space by an exterior determinism. Now remember that. That's real important in the subject of exteriorization. This Satan is surrounded entirely by this complete belief that something else is fixing everything else in space. Although we can't find any source of this, so we invent God.
Interesting. Would you like to add anything on the subject of God before we move on to another topic?
Then, although a lot of people will say carelessly, well, God is everywhere, remember that this was an idea which was introduced rather latterly in Christian religion. The God of which they speak, of whom they speak continually, is Yahweh. Lord knows how it's pronounced, because it is so secret that nobody really is supposed to be able to pronounce it, so they omitted all of the vowels in the word, and they spell it only with its consonants. So Lord knows how this word is to be pronounced, but more agreed upon pronunciation amongst scholars so they can talk about it is Yahweh. And this is the Christian God, but he lives in a trunk with a leopard skin. That's right. That is the full story on it.
So, about your beliefs, would you tell us how the Thetans came to be on Earth?
They were imported. They were actually, the trick was to shoot somebody, disable somebody, very often a needle into the lung, and at the same time to hit him with frozen alcohol and glycol, which preparation is guaranteed to pick up a Thetan. All he had to do was pick him up and put him in a refrigerator, and they had him, boy. Because he tried to exteriorize from the body, there he was, frozen. And they threw him into collection points boxed them up in boxes, threw them into space planes, which are the exact copy. DC-8, the DC-8 airplane is the exact copy of the space plane of that day. And no difference, except the DC-8 had fans, propellers on it, and the space plane.
So the Thetans were dumped here.
Well, I know this, that onto this planet there's a great deal of dumping has gone on. Stuff from the nearby galaxy. Not this galaxy, but from the next galaxy over, and so forth, going on here. I know they take political prisoners and guys who they don't want around. But it's less personal than they think. They just have excess population, so they start to get rid of their excess population. You see, they've got a revolt, or you're on the wrong side of a war, or something like that, and they pick you up in droves and ice cube you and throw you into a sea someplace. I know this planet has been subjected to that, and several planets in this immediate end of this galaxy have been subjected to that. That I know.
Why do you suppose Earth was chosen as a dumping ground? Surely the fact that Earth has life on it whereas many other planets do not would make it more interesting.
Not really interested in Earth at all, as such. Because Earth is a heavy gravity planet, and who the hell wants a heavy gravity planet? Earth would be much better off lying in chunks in an orbit around the sun. But naturally, that's pretty rough assignment, blowing up something this size and putting it around, so nobody would do that. But completely aside from that fact, Earth has been used consistently as a prison. And it is a prison, and it is heavily screened. There are installations in Mongolia, there are installations in the Pyrenees here on Earth, there are installations down the mountains of the moon in Africa, which pick up very often people on death.
Are you saying then that there are alien installations here on Earth then?
There are saucer crews here. There's all sorts of things on Earth here from the 5th Invader Force. Very interesting. This is directly and violently in opposition to the 4th Invader Force, and the 5th Invader Force, out of its own protection, took over Venus, all relatively modern times. Took over Venus and tried to stabilize the Venusian. If you called a 5th invader, though, a Venusian, he would probably shoot you out of hand, because it would be a horrible insult. They merely monitor the government of Venus. And they leave Mars strictly alone. Now, this is really roughly a rundown of the, quote, political situation in the solar system.
Please tell us more about the 4th Invasion Force, Mr. Hubbard.
And there was the 4th Invader Force was here. The 5th Invader Force came in to use this area, and the name of this solar system is Space Station 33. And they started to use this area without suspecting that the 4th Invader Force had been there for God knows how many skillion years, had been sitting down, and they have their installations up on Mars, and they have tremendous screened operation. The Martian operation is a fascinating operation simply because it has gone into 100% holding force. And it does everything it does with tremendous coercion. It's sitting behind a defense screen of enormous size. And it's frankly impossible to penetrate that except as a Thetan. And if you penetrate as a Thetan, you go through the Martian screen, and they gotcha.
So there is, or was, life on both Venus and Mars. Do you suppose there is life on any other planets in our solar system?
But although I don't think you'd have very much pleasure out of kissing a girl from Jupiter, that's a heavy gravity planet. If you stepped on the planet Jupiter in one of these meat bodies that you presently have, you would become a pancake promptly, you see. And what atmosphere it has lies in seas of liquid air and so on. We might say that this is somewhat rigorous as an environment, not completely similar to Russia, but well, so you do get these various variations.
And it's not all that horrifying, however. You find somebody running around planet Jupiter, he'd be built to withstand that climatic condition and that gravitic condition and so forth, and his legs might be a bit modified and his arms and that sort of thing, but he probably would look like an Eskimo.
Well, Mr. Hubbard, it has been very interesting listening to your views. One final question. It has been suggested by some that you are a racist. Have you any comment?
Actually, have you ever noticed how a Negro in particular, down south, where they're pretty close to the soil, personifies mess? The gate post and the wagon and the whip and anything around there, a hat. Hey, they talk to him, you know. What's the matter with you, hat? They imbued him with personality.